So I was thinking about God's providence and sovereignty, and this came to my mind that you don't get to enjoy God's providence when you have enough, or say you won't appreciate God's providence when you have enough. You won't appreciate God's sovereignty when you have um, enough resources to control situations around you. So it means that you tend to appreciate God's providence and sovereignty more when you have little, right? And when you have little, when you can't control situations around you, when it seems as if your power is not enough. And that is when God steps in. And that is when you get to understand God's providence and sovereignty over your life. And that is one of the things that make God to be God. Right? When your back is against the wall, you do not know what to do, you do not know where to run to. That is when God's providence and sovereignty comes into play. And when that comes in, when that plays out, oh my God, that is when you say God is good. Right? A typical example is this. And you look at the Bible, you look at the life of Jesus Christ, the ministry of Jesus Christ. Look at how God fed 5,000 people with how many fish and how many loaves of bread. Right? That is God's providence. Providence. When you look at when Jesus was traveling and there was storm, that is God's sovereignty. The disciples could not do anything again. The only thing they could do was to call upon Jesus, and Jesus calmed the storm. So, as a believer, you get to enjoy God's providence and sovereignty, most especially when you do not have control over things. God's sovereignty will come into place, and God's sovereignty has to do with power, control over things that you cannot control. God's providence has to do with provision, care, when your capacity cannot um, cater for that thing again, right? That is where you control.